Let me ask you a question that most people avoid answering honestly. After all the years you've worked, why are you still not financially free? You wake up early, you work hard, you stay busy, and yet at the end of the month there's little left. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Hard work alone does not create wealth. It creates income, yes, but not freedom. Because if all you do is work for money, you will always need to work to survive. And that is not a strategy, that is a cycle. The real difference between those who struggle and those who succeed is not effort, it's what their effort is building. One works for today, the other builds for tomorrow. So the question is not, are you working hard? The question is your work building something that will outlast your effort? Let me begin with a truth that may challenge everything you've been taught about success. Hard work by itself is not enough. Now that sounds strange. Because from a young age you were told that if you just work hard, everything will fall into place. But if that were true, then everyone working hard today would be wealthy, fulfilled, and financially free. And we both know that's not the case. I've met people who work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and still struggle to get ahead. They are not lazy. They are not careless. In fact, they are some of the most dedicated individuals you will ever meet. But dedication without direction leads to exhaustion, not progress. It keeps you busy, but it does not necessarily move you forward. I learned this lesson the hard way. There was a time in my life when I believed that if I just kept working harder, things would improve. I stayed busy. I stayed committed. But at the end of each month, the results were not matching the effort. And that's when I had to ask myself a difficult question. Where is all this effort taking me? You see, effort is like energy, and energy without direction gets scattered. It goes in many directions, but it does not accumulate into anything meaningful. It's like trying to fill a bucket with holes in it. No matter how much water you pour in, it never stays. That's when I began to understand that the key is not just to work hard, but to work with purpose. To know exactly what you are building, not just what you are doing. Because activity and productivity are not the same thing. You can be active all day and still not produce results that move your life forward. So I made a shift. Instead of focusing only on effort, I started focusing on direction. I began by defining clear goals. Not vague ideas, but specific targets. I asked myself, what do I truly want financially? What kind of life am I trying to build? Because without a clear destination, any road will seem acceptable, and that is where most people lose their way. Once I had clarity, I created a plan. A simple plan, but a meaningful one. I decided how much I would earn, how much I would save, and how much I would invest. And more importantly, I committed to following that plan consistently. Because a plan without action is just a wish. I also made it a habit to review my progress, to take time regularly to see what was working and what needed adjustment. Because direction is not something you set once, it is something you refine over time. It requires attention, awareness, and a willingness to improve. And here's what I discovered. When your work has direction, your effort begins to multiply. You are no longer just working, you are building. Every action has purpose. Every decision has meaning. And over time, those focused efforts begin to create real results. So don't just work hard. Work with intention. Work with clarity. Know where you are going and make sure your daily actions are leading you there. Because hard work without direction leads nowhere, but focused effort builds everything. Now let me take you a step further. Because even when you begin to work with direction, there is another trap that keeps many people from ever becoming wealthy. And that is the belief that income alone will make you rich. It sounds reasonable at first. If you earn more, you should have more. But in reality, many people earn a great deal and still have very little to show for it. I've met individuals with impressive incomes, people who worked their way up, increased their earnings, and achieved what most would consider success. But behind the surface, there was a different story. Their expenses grew with their income. Their money flowed out as quickly as it came in, and they remained dependent on the next paycheck. And that's when it becomes clear. Income is important, but it is not enough. You see, income is what you earn, but wealth is what you keep and grow. And if what you earn is not being converted into something that produces more, then it remains temporary. The moment you stop working, it stops as well. That is not freedom, that is dependency in a different form. I had to learn this lesson by observing my own patterns. There was a time when I focused primarily on increasing my income. I believed that if I could just earn more, everything else would fall into place. And while my income did increase, my financial position did not improve in the way I expected, because I had not changed what I did with the money once I received it. That realization led me to a new understanding. Money must be converted. It must be turned into something that works for you. Otherwise, it simply passes through your hands. So I made a decision. From every amount I earned, I would set aside a portion, not as an afterthought, but as a priority. Before I spent on anything else, I directed a percentage toward building something that could grow. At first, it was not a large amount, but it was consistent. And consistency is what creates results. I began to invest in opportunities that had the potential to produce income. Not randomly, but with thought and learning. Because investing is not just about putting money somewhere. It is about understanding where and why. And over time, those small contributions began to accumulate. What changed was not just my finances, but my mindset. I stopped thinking only as an earner and started thinking as a builder. Because an earner depends on effort, but a builder creates systems that continue beyond effort. Another important shift was controlling the urge to spend everything I earned. Because it is easy to justify spending when income increases. But if every increase in income leads to an increase in expenses, then progress is delayed. Instead, I focused on long-term growth. I reminded myself that every dollar I kept and invested had the potential to become more. And that perspective made it easier to delay unnecessary spending. Over time, something powerful begins to happen. Your income is no longer your only source of support. Your assets begin to contribute. They begin to grow, to produce, to create stability. And that is when you begin to move from earning a living to building wealth. Because income alone will never make you rich. But what you do with that income can change everything. Now let me show you another shift that can completely change your financial life. Because once you understand direction and begin to convert income into assets, you must also understand this. Your income is not determined by how hard you work, but by the value you bring to the marketplace. And that is a difficult truth for many people to accept. You see, it is easy to believe that effort alone should be rewarded, that the more hours you put in, the more you should earn. But the world does not operate that way. The marketplace does not pay for effort, it pays for results, for value, for the ability to solve problems and meet needs. I had to learn this lesson early on. There was a time when I believed I deserved more simply because I was working harder. I was putting in the hours, doing what was required, staying busy. But my income did not reflect that effort. And for a while, that felt frustrating. Until I realized that I was asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, why am I not earning more? I began asking, what value am I bringing? Because that is the real question that determines your income. Not how hard you try, but how useful you are to others. When I made that shift, everything began to change. I stopped focusing only on effort and started focusing on improvement. I asked myself, what skills do I need to develop to become more valuable? What problems can I learn to solve that others are willing to pay for? And that led me to something important. Skills are assets. They are something you carry with you, something that can be developed, refined, and multiplied over time. Unlike money, which can be lost, skills stay with you and continue to produce. So I began investing in myself. I spent time learning, practicing, improving. I worked on my ability to communicate, because communication influences everything. I worked on understanding people, solving problems, and creating solutions that others found valuable. And here is what I discovered. As your value increases, your opportunities increase. As your skills improve, your income potential expands. Not because you are working harder, but because you are working smarter and contributing more. Another important realization was that growth must be continuous. The marketplace is always changing, always evolving. And if you remain the same, your value does not increase. That is why learning must become a habit, not an occasional effort. Each day, I look for ways to improve, even in small ways, because small improvements, repeated consistently, lead to significant growth over time. And that growth begins to show in your results. You also begin to see that income is not something you chase, it is something you attract by becoming more valuable. When you bring more to the table, the rewards naturally follow. So instead of focusing only on working harder, focus on becoming better. Develop skills that matter. Improve your ability to contribute. Learn to solve meaningful problems. Because in the end, your income will always reflect the value you provide. And when you increase your value, you increase your potential to build wealth. Now let me bring you to a point that quietly determines whether everything we've talked about actually works in your life or not. You can have direction, you can earn income, you can even understand value, but without discipline, none of it lasts. In fact, without discipline, even a high income can leave you stuck in the same place year after year. I've seen this more times than I can count. People who earn well, sometimes very well, but still struggle financially. And when you look closely, the issue is not opportunity or income, it is behavior. Because money, when not managed properly, has a way of disappearing. It flows toward habits. And if those habits are weak, the results will be weak as well. I had to face this truth in my own life. There was a time when I knew what to do, but I wasn't always doing it consistently. I understood the importance of saving, of investing, of planning, but understanding alone did not create results. It was only when I began to apply discipline that things started to change. You see, discipline is not something dramatic. It is not about making one big decision. It is about making small, consistent decisions every day. It is about doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it. And when it comes to money, that consistency is everything. So I began to build simple habits. I didn't try to change everything at once. I focused on creating systems that would support me. One of the most effective steps I took was to make saving and investing automatic. Because when something is automatic, it removes the temptation to skip it. It becomes part of your routine, not something you have to decide on each time. I also set clear limits on my spending, not to restrict myself, but to guide myself. Because without limits, it is easy to overspend without realizing it. But when you define boundaries, your decisions become more intentional. You begin to think before you act. Another important habit was tracking my finances regularly. Just taking time each week to see where I stood. Not in a complicated way, but in a clear and honest way. Because when you track your money, you stay aware. And awareness is what keeps you in control. Here is what most people don't realize. Discipline creates freedom. At first, it may feel like restriction. It may feel like you are limiting yourself. But over time, those disciplined actions begin to build stability. They create a foundation, and from that foundation, you gain options. Without discipline, money controls you. With discipline, you control your money. And that is the difference between staying stuck and moving forward. Because in the end, it is not what you know that changes your life. It is what you consistently do. Now let me show you something that sits at the center of everything we've been talking about. Because even if you earn more and become more valuable, your future will still be decided by one simple thing: your habits, not your intentions, not your plans, but your daily financial behavior. Because in the end, it is not your income that defines your future, it is what you consistently do with it. I've seen people with modest incomes build solid financial lives, and I've seen people with high incomes struggle constantly. And when you look closely, the difference is not how much they earn, it is how they manage what they earn. Because money follows patterns, and those patterns are created by habits. There was a time when I didn't fully appreciate how powerful small habits could be. I thought big changes would create big results. But over time, I began to realize that it is the small, repeated actions that truly shape your financial direction. The daily decisions, the unnoticed choices, the habits you follow without thinking, they are the ones that either build your future or slowly weaken it. So I began to pay attention. I started tracking where my money was going, not just occasionally, but consistently. And what I discovered was eye-opening. There were expenses that added no real value, habits that had become automatic, and patterns that were quietly holding me back. Not in a dramatic way, but in a steady, consistent way. And that's when I understood something important. If you don't control your habits will control your results. So I made a decision to take control. I didn't try to eliminate everything at once. I simply began to identify what was unnecessary, what could be reduced, what could be removed, what could be improved. And step by step, I began to make changes. I cut out expenses that didn't contribute to my goals. Not because I couldn't afford them, but because they didn't move me forward. And that shift in thinking made all the difference. Because now, every dollar had a purpose. Then I took the next step. I didn't just save what I stopped spending. I redirected it. I gave it a new role. I began to invest it into something that could grow. Something that could build my future instead of just satisfying the present. And over time, those small changes began to add up. Not just financially, but mentally. I felt more in control, more intentional, more focused. Because when your habits are aligned with your goals, progress becomes natural. Here is what you must understand. Your habits are building your future, whether you are aware of it or not. Every day, through small decisions, you are either moving closer to financial freedom or further away from it. So take a closer look at your habits, not once, but regularly. Adjust them, improve them, strengthen them, because in the end, success is not built in big moments. It is built in small, consistent actions repeated over time. And your habits will always determine where those actions lead. Now let me take you to a deeper understanding of what it truly means to build wealth. Because most people spend their entire lives working for money without ever learning how to make money work for them. And as long as that remains true, your life will always be tied to your effort. You will always have to show up, always have to trade your time, always have to depend on your ability to keep going. I want you to think about this carefully. If your income stops the moment you stop working, then your life is limited by your time. And time, as you know, is limited. There are only so many hours in a day, only so many years in a life. So if your income depends entirely on your effort, then your growth will always have a ceiling. I remember coming to a point where I had to ask myself a very important question. Am I building something that will continue without me, or am I simply working to sustain myself? Because there is a difference between earning a living and building a life. At that moment, I began to see the importance of making money work. Not just earning it, but directing it towards something that could grow, something that could produce more. Because money, when used correctly, has the ability to expand. It can create opportunities, it can generate returns, and it can begin to build a system that supports you over time. So I started thinking differently. Instead of focusing only on how much I could earn through effort, I began to focus on how I could use what I already had to create something that would continue. I began to look at opportunities to invest, to participate in ventures that had the potential to grow, to build assets that could generate income beyond my direct involvement. And here's what I learned. Wealth is not just about accumulation. It is about multiplication. It is about taking what you have and putting it to work in a way that creates more. Because if your money is sitting idle, it is not growing. And if it is not growing, it is not working for you. I also began to understand the importance of reinvesting. Because the first results you see are just the beginning. The real power comes when you allow those results to continue working, to continue building, to continue expanding. Reinvestment turns small progress into significant growth over time. You see, this shift is not just financial, it is philosophical. It is a change in how you see your role in the world. You are no longer just someone who earns money. You become someone who directs it, someone who manages it, someone who puts it to work. And when you reach that point, your relationship with money changes. You begin to think in terms of systems, not just effort. You begin to focus on building things that can grow, things that can sustain themselves, things that can eventually support you. Because the goal is not to work endlessly for money. The goal is to reach a point where your money works for you. And when that happens, you begin to move toward true financial freedom. Now let me bring your attention to a principle that separates those who remain dependent from those who begin to build true wealth. It is the principle of ownership, because there is a fundamental difference between earning income and owning assets. And until you understand that difference, your financial future will always be limited by the role you play rather than the assets you own. You see, most people are trained to become excellent employees. They learn how to show up, how to perform, how to deliver value in exchange for income, and there is nothing wrong with that. It is an important part of society. But if that becomes your only path, then your income will always depend on your time and your position. And when either of those is affected, your income is affected as well. I had to come to terms with this early on. I realized that if all I did was exchange my time for money, then I was always going to be limited by how much time I had. And that is not a strong foundation for building wealth. So I began to shift my thinking from earning to owning, because ownership changes everything. When you own something, you are no longer dependent on a single source of income. You now have something that can produce, something that can grow, something that can generate returns over time. And that is where real wealth begins to form. So I began to look for opportunities where I could build ownership. Not necessarily in large ways at first, but in meaningful ways. I understood that every step toward ownership, no matter how small, was a step toward independence. I started to think in terms of equity. What can I build that belongs to me? What can I invest in that gives me a stake in something that has the potential to grow? Because ownership is not just about possession, it is about participation in growth. And here is what I discovered. When you own something that grows, Your financial position is no longer tied only to your effort. It begins to expand beyond your direct input. Your assets begin to work, begin to produce, begin to contribute to your future. This shift requires a change in mindset. Instead of thinking only about earning more from your current role, you begin to think about building something of your own, something that can exist beyond your daily effort, something that can grow independently over time. And that is where true financial progress begins. You don't have to start big. You just have to start. Begin with a small project, a simple investment, or an idea that you can develop over time, because ownership is built step by step. It is not something that happens overnight. The key is to be consistent, to continue building, continue learning, and continue expanding your understanding of how ownership works. Because when you shift from being only an earner to becoming an owner, your entire financial future begins to change. And that is when you move from dependency to control. Now let me take you to a realization that can completely reshape the way you view your days, your work, and your future. Because for most people, time is not being used to build anything, it is being traded. Hour by hour, day by day, your time is exchanged for income. And as long as that is your only approach, your income will always be limited by the number of hours you can give. You see, time is one of the most valuable assets you have. But if all you do is trade it, then it becomes a ceiling on your growth. There's only so much you can do in a day, only so many hours you can work. And once those hours are gone, your earning stops. That is the limitation of trading time. I began to understand that if I wanted a different outcome, I needed to use my time differently. Not just to work, but to build. Because there is a difference between using your time to earn and using your time to create. One keeps you active, the other moves you forward. So I started asking myself a different question. What can I build that will continue beyond the time I put into it? What can I create that has the potential to grow, to scale, to operate, even when I am not directly involved? That question changed how I approached my days. Instead of focusing only on immediate results, I began to allocate time toward building something that could grow over time. Something that could eventually produce results beyond my personal effort. Because that is how you begin to multiply time, by creating systems, by building assets, by developing processes that extend your reach. And here is what I learned. When you build something that can scale, your time becomes leveraged. You are no longer limited by your own effort alone. Your work begins to extend beyond the moment. It begins to carry forward, and that is where growth begins to accelerate. I also became more aware of how I was spending my time. Because not all time is productive. Some time is wasted without notice. Distractions, unnecessary activities, and habits that do not contribute to your goals, they slowly take away from the time you could be using to build. So I made a conscious effort to reduce those distractions, not to eliminate enjoyment, but to create balance. Because every hour you spend has value. And when you use that time wisely, it becomes an investment in your future. Another important step was learning to work with systems. Because systems allow you to do more with the same amount of time. They help you organize, structure, and repeat what works. And when you build systems that support your goals, you begin to create consistency in your progress. You see, time itself does not multiply, but what you do with your time can multiply. And that is where the opportunity lies. So instead of asking how many hours can I work, start asking what can I build with the time I have? Because that shift changes everything. And when you begin to use your time to build, not just to earn, you move from limitation to expansion. And that is where real growth begins. Now let me share something that most people underestimate, yet it quietly determines the quality of their entire financial life. It is this: your lack of financial education is costing you more than you realize. Not just in money that is lost, but in opportunities that are never seen, decisions that are never made, and growth that is never achieved. You see, money without knowledge is fragile. It comes and goes without direction. It flows into your hands, but without understanding, it does not stay long enough to build anything meaningful. And over time, that creates a pattern: earn, spend, repeat, with very little progress in between. I've seen this in many people, not because they are incapable, but because they were never taught how money truly works. They know how to earn it, how to spend it, but not how to manage it, grow it, or multiply it. And without that knowledge, they remain dependent on effort alone. I had to come to a point where I realized that if I wanted a better financial future, I needed to become a student of money. Not occasionally, but consistently. Because the world of finance is always evolving. And if you are not learning, you are not growing. And if you are not growing, you are falling behind. So I began to study. Not in a complicated way, but in a consistent way. I made it a habit to learn something new regularly. Not everything at once, but step by step, one concept at a time. Because true understanding does not come from rushing, it comes from repetition and application. And that is the key, application, because knowledge by itself is not enough. It must be used. It must be applied. Otherwise, it remains theoretical, and theory alone does not create results. It is the application of knowledge that changes your situation. So as I learned, I applied, I tested ideas, I made adjustments, I observed results, and through that process, I began to develop a deeper understanding of how money works. I also made a commitment to stay consistent with learning. Not when it was convenient, but as part of my routine. Because growth does not happen by accident, it happens by design. And when you design your life around learning, your knowledge begins to expand. Another important realization was that financial education is not just about learning how to invest. It is about understanding how to think, how to make decisions, how to evaluate opportunities, and how to avoid mistakes that can cost you over time. Because when you understand money, you begin to make better choices, and better choices lead to better results. You also begin to see opportunities that others may overlook, not because they don't exist, but because you are now aware of them. And that awareness gives you an advantage. So the solution is simple, but powerful. Make learning a priority, not occasionally, but consistently. Dedicate time each day or each week to improving your understanding of money, business, and investing. And most importantly, apply what you learn, because knowledge that is not used has no impact. But knowledge that is applied has the power to transform your life. Because when you increase your knowledge, you increase your ability to build wealth. Now let me bring you to one of the most subtle yet powerful reasons people remain where they are. It is not lack of knowledge, not lack of opportunity, not even lack of ability. It is delay. The habit of waiting. Waiting for the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect moment. And while they wait, life continues to move forward, but they remain in the same place. You see, there is no perfect time. There is only now. And every time you delay action, you are not just postponing a decision, you are postponing your future. Because progress does not come from waiting. It comes from acting. I've seen this pattern many times. People understand what they need to do. They know they should start investing. They know they should begin building something. They know they should take a step forward. But instead of acting, they wait. They wait until they feel ready. They wait until everything is clear. They wait until the conditions are perfect. And here's the truth. By the time everything feels perfect, the opportunity has already passed. I had to learn that action is the bridge between knowledge and results. You can have all the understanding in the world, but until you act, nothing changes. Action is what brings your plans to life. It is what turns your ideas into reality. So I made a decision. I would no longer wait for the perfect moment. I would start with what I had, not waiting until everything was ideal, but taking the first step with what was available. Because progress does not require perfection. It requires movement. At first, those steps may seem small. They may not feel significant. But that is how every journey begins. Small actions, taken consistently, begin to build momentum. And once momentum starts, it becomes easier to continue. I also began to focus on consistency rather than perfection. Because perfection can slow you down. It can make you hesitant, cautious, and overly concerned with getting everything right. But consistency keeps you moving. It allows you to improve as you go. Another important realization is that you do not need everything to begin. You do not need to have everything figured out. You just need to take the first step, and then the next, and then the next. Because action creates clarity. The more you act, the more you learn. And the more you learn, the more confident you become. But if you wait, you remain uncertain. You remain stuck. So instead of asking, is this the perfect time? Ask, what is the next step I can take right now? Because that shift changes everything. Even the smallest step, when taken today, is more powerful than the best plan that is never acted upon. And when you begin to move, something remarkable happens. You begin to build momentum, you begin to gain experience, you begin to see progress, and that is how you move from being stuck to moving forward. Because in the end, the future belongs to those who act today. Now let me take you to a principle that separates those who simply work for a living from those who begin to build real wealth. And it is this: wealth is not built by effort alone. It is built by ownership. You can work harder than anyone you know, but if you do not own anything that grows, your efforts will always have a limit. I've seen this truth play out in many lives. There are people who give their best every day, who put in the hours, who stay committed to their work. And yet, after years of effort, they find themselves in the same position, or only slightly ahead. Not because they didn't work hard, but because they never shifted from earning to owning. You see, effort produces income, but ownership produces wealth. And there is a difference between the two. Effort requires your constant presence. Ownership allows you to benefit from something that continues to grow, even beyond your direct involvement. I had to come to understand that if I remained only focused on earning, I would always be limited by my time and energy. But if I began to focus on ownership, I could begin to build something that had the potential to grow over time. So I began to change the way I thought about money. Instead of focusing only on how much I could earn from my effort, I started asking myself, what can I own that will grow in value? What can I invest in that gives me a stake in something that can produce more over time? Because ownership changes your position. When you own something, you are no longer just a participant, you are a beneficiary of growth. You are no longer just trading time, you are building value. I began to explore opportunities where I could acquire ownership, not in a rushed or careless way, but with thought and understanding. Because ownership must be built with intention. It is not about buying everything, it is about choosing wisely. And as I continued, I also realized the importance of reinvesting, because the first returns you receive are just the beginning. When you reinvest those returns, you begin to expand your ownership. You begin to increase your stake. And over time, that expansion leads to greater growth. You see, wealth is not just about accumulation, it is about expansion. It is about taking what you have and using it to build more. And ownership allows you to do exactly that. Another important realization is that ownership creates leverage. It allows you to benefit from the efforts of others, from systems, from growth that extends beyond your own time. And that is where real financial progress begins. So instead of focusing only on increasing your effort, begin to focus on increasing your ownership. Look for opportunities to build assets, to acquire equity, to participate in growth. Because when you own more, you have more control over your financial future. And that is how you move from simply working for wealth to actually building it. Now, let me share with you a principle that is simple to understand, but powerful enough to change your entire financial future if you truly live by it. If you spend first, you will always be last. Now, that may not sound serious at first, but when you look closely at the results, you begin to see why this one principle separates those who struggle from those who build wealth. You see, most people follow a common pattern. Money comes in and immediately it begins to leave. Expenses come first. Needs, wants, obligations, everything is prioritized before anything is saved or invested. And by the time they reach the end of that process, there is very little, sometimes nothing, left to build with. I had to learn that this approach keeps you in a cycle. Because when you spend first, you train yourself to live on whatever remains. And whatever remains is often not enough to create progress. So you stay in the same place, month after month, year after year. But then I discovered a simple shift that changed everything. Instead of spending first, I decided to pay myself first. Before anything else, before any expenses, before any commitments, I would set aside a portion for my future, not what was left, but what was decided. That shift alone began to change my financial behavior. Because now, I was no longer reacting to what remained, I was planning what would grow. And that makes a significant difference. When you prioritize yourself first, you begin to take responsibility for your future. I also began to make this process automatic. Because when something depends on your decision each time, it becomes easier to skip it. But when it is automatic, it becomes part of your system. It happens consistently, without requiring constant thought or willpower. And consistency is what builds results over time. And here's what I realized. When you treat saving and investing as non-negotiable, your mindset begins to shift. You no longer see it as optional. You see it as essential. Because you understand that this is how your future is built. At first, it may require adjustment. You may need to rethink your spending, to organize your priorities differently. But that is part of the process. Because discipline is what creates stability. And stability is what allows growth to take place. You begin to realize that every time you choose to spend before saving, you are choosing the present over the future. But every time you choose to save first, you are choosing the future over the present. And that is a powerful decision, because the future is built by those who prepare for it, and preparation begins with prioritization. So make this shift in your life. Decide that your future comes first. Set aside what is needed before you spend on anything else. Treat your investments as something important, something that must be protected. Because when you pay yourself first, you begin to take control of your financial direction. And that is how you move from reacting to building. Now let me leave you with this. Your future is not controlled by what you wish for, but by what you consistently do. Hard work alone is not enough. You must direct it, invest it, and build assets with it. Every decision you make today is either moving you closer to financial freedom or keeping you where you are. So take control. Start building, start investing, start owning. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Create it through action. Begin now. Stay consistent and think long term. Because your financial future is not something you hope for, it is something you build.